Thank you for downloading this episode of Folk on Foot. Before we start, I just wanted to share a brief message. If you like what we do, we really need your support to keep going. You can join our wonderful band of members and you'll get great rewards. These include access to our amazing Folk on Foot on Film archive of hundreds of songs shot on location on our travels around the UK and Ireland. To sign up, just go to folkonfoot.com/supportus. You'll also get an ad-free version of all our episodes and an email postcard from me each time we go on a walk. If you just want the ad-free version, it'll cost you £3 a month, and you can get it through your Apple Podcast app or at folkonfoot.com/supportus. Finally, if you don't want to make a regular commitment but do want to show how much you love us, you can simply buy us a coffee. You can also do that at folkonfoot.com/supportus. Every penny we get goes back into making more episodes of Folk on Foot. So thank you and enjoy the walk.
Hey, it's Cindy Howes and Lizzie No from the podcast Basic Folk, honest conversations with folk musicians.
Basic Folk is truly changing the game with our well-researched deep dives that aim to empower the listener while fostering the folk community.
I basically am writing worship music for youth group rejects.
Maternal regrets and maternal guilt are universal.
I try to make things that are beautiful and that are made with like a purity of intention.
You can listen to Basic Folk on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network or at basicfolk.com.
It's a bright, sunny September day and we have come to Beckenham in southeast London, and we're heading for a place with an extraordinary history, the Bethlem Royal Hospital, a psychiatric hospital now using modern methods, but its history stretches back hundreds of years. And when we get there, we're going to meet Lunatraktors, the duo who are partners in music and in life. Clair, the Couteur, the vocalist and researcher, and Carli, Jefferson, the choreographer and percussionist. And they specialise in something called broken folk, of which more in a moment.
Oi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You're unloading the van.
We are, yeah. This is Constance, the van, and she holds everything.
What have you got
pretty
here?
much. This is our big bass drum. This is Maeve. She's kind
Everyone has a name. Every
most
item
things
has a name.
have names.
Yeah.
It's good to name entities. It's good to name beings, no, that come with you on the journey. So yeah.
What's Claire doing around the back?
Claire's
here?
around the back. They are getting out the roller for Maeve.
I'm wrestling with netting and a roller. There you go.
A
Anything.
roller.
Yes, this is for Maeve, our big 18th century style military drum.
Right. And then you've got a trolley here, which is absolutely loaded down.
Yes.
What's this wooden thing sticking up?
That is a box made by a guy called Lorcan in Ireland for dancing on, and it has an electric pickup in it which allows you to plug it into a music system so it amplifies itself. It's brand new, we've barely used it, and it was a kind of recovery treat for Carli after her ankle surgery, because
Right.
it turns out 40 years of tap dancing isn't great for
It's not good for the body.
But you're feeling better, Carli?
I'm definitely there. About a month ago, I was learning to walk again. So coming
You're all
on
right for
tour.
today's walk. I'm worried about
Yeah,
you.
no, it's fine. Coming on tour was a little bit of a fast track.
bit frightening.
into-
And will you be able to use the board?
Yeah,
with your
absolutely.
ankle
Because
injury?
with tap shoes, I can do what I do again, but it's just a little bit different.
Right.
It's
And
just
then
not the same.
Is this an accordion here?
This is an accordion. That's Magda.
Magda, our East German bass accordion.
Okay, I'll try and remember all these names. It's like meeting a whole bunch of new people.
Yeah.
You know. And then there's a bag there with some costumes.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're the Hazard Bears.
The Hazard Bears.
Yes.
This is going to be an amazing journey, I can tell you.
There's maybe a reason why we're in this. You
This
can see more and more the
situation.
reason why we're
Well, I was
here.
going to ask you why you wanted us to come to the Bethlem Royal Hospital. Why did you think that was a good idea?
Well, we've been working on this song called Tom of Bedlam and another related song called Mad Maudlin. They're from 1600s and 1700s respectively. And they're both songs about Bedlam, but not about Bedlam itself really, but more about what it signifies culturally. And I guess that's what we're really interested in. Although both my mother and my grandfather worked here.
Worked here?
They worked here when they were qualifying doctors, psychiatrists. And my grandfather was the head of the women's section at Broadmoor Asylum. So my mother grew up at Broadmoor Asylum.
So the treatment of mental health issues is very much part of your family?
Yeah, exactly. It's part of me in a way. Although, of course, my brother and sister are both psychologists, and I went in a different direction.
Right, but you're in a duo called Lunatraktors.
Yes.
Where does the name come from?
Well, the name comes from a conversation we were having in a bar in Prague, which is where we met, about whenever we played music together, we attracted loons. We tend to sort of magnetise unusual people, and that kind of Lunatraktors became a sort of pun that we thought, oh, well, there's this sort of moon, post-Soviet lunar agriculture, retrofuturism, alternate history kind of vibe.
We hadn't actually started the band at that point. We had another band that was called the Merry Freaks, and then we separated and moved in different countries. We were just friends at that point. And then finally in 2017, Claire called me and said, oh, do you want to start the band? I think, well, we've already got the name, so we may
Now's
as
the
well.
time for action.
Now's the time. And we'd definitely been attracting loons along our paths separately as well as together.
And
so
is that
it makes
partly
sense.
about being kind of outside of the mainstream culture?
I think, yeah. I don't think either of us particularly felt like we were in the in crowd at school, or we were certainly the lone wolves and the weirdos. So, I think you have to lean into that or have a very happy life. Yeah.
Fight it or enjoy it.
To resist is maybe a little bit futile anyway. So.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to be here because it's an extraordinary history to this place, and the name Bedlam or Bethlem, which we'll talk about more later. And there are 200 acres of grounds here, woodland, orchards, meadows, and we're going to explore some of those, and we're going to find out more about the extraordinary history of this place, which goes back to the 1200s. And we're going to take some guidance from Peter O'Hare, who's the head of occupational therapy at the hospital and who has mapped out trails through these grounds, trying to encourage people to come in and enjoy them. Let's get some insight from Peter about why he did that.
One reason we made the nature trails was to make the grounds more accessible and usable, primarily by the patients, but also by staff and visitors as well. Because prior to that, people were never sure where they were allowed to walk and where it was safe to walk, so people often wouldn't go out into the woods or the meadows. So setting up the way-marked trails certainly opened it up to everyone. And also, we were able to signpost along the way just things of interest. And it opened up the hospital because, again, some time back, people wouldn't come into psychiatric hospitals. You know, they had a bad reputation or whatever, and somewhere you just wouldn't want to go. So now Bethlem has totally changed. It's opened up, you know, it's welcomed people in. And the nature trails were part of that work.
We're coming into a wood now. I mean, it's amazing to have come from the hospital building where we left your van and to be coming into this really mature wood with sunlight dappling through, and I think you saw lots of squirrels.
The tiny squirrels, they're clambering around as they do, and you can hear the nuts dropping down at the moment because we're coming into the fall time, you know, so it's
quite a magical
time.
atmosphere, isn't
really
it?
Yeah, it's beautiful and really, really big trees and just a very special feeling. And then the sense that we're just 5 minutes away from the grounds and you can still hear people. I mean, who knows when you venture deeper into the woods how it would feel like entering another world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it would. And I've noticed that there isn't a guitar or a violin or fiddle in sight.
No.
Are you deliberate rejectors of the guitar and
Yes.
fiddle school of
Yes.
folk music?
Yes.
I did have a go at playing the guitar, but I realised that I tried to pitch what I wanted to sing with that instrument and just couldn't find it. Couldn't find it on that ridiculous amount of strings. So I abandoned that one. And I was dancing from a very young age, so tap dance and percussion and drumming felt much more natural to me.
And you're the only folk band that I've met so far that has a choreographer.
Yes. Built-in choreographer and
Choreographer
researcher.
and clown
And a researcher,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
And
that's
so
us.
research is about looking into the history of the songs, is it?
Yeah, very much so, but not as a historian. My PhD is about art and museums, and I'm interested in how history and fiction and heritage all kind of occupy the same space. It's a sort of mythological space. So I'm really interested in the past as a way of understanding the present.
So these two backgrounds collide when you come to make music together and perform together. And so they're rooted in a deep understanding of what's going on, presumably.
Yeah, I would say a deep questioning rather
Yeah,
than a deep
curiosity.
understanding.
Something that binds both of them maybe is a sense of following pathways, trusting in intuitions, which I think very much happens within research.
Hunches,
And always happens on stage.
coincidences.
And always happens when you're working with bodies in space and finding movements. You have to trust.
You have to let the movement happen.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
We call it performance research, I think is the best way
Yeah.
of describing it.
I wonder if you put some of it into practice and do one of your songs here.
Yes.
Absolutely, it'd be the perfect place to do utterances.
And we're going to suit up for these songs.
Suit up for
yes,
the podcast.
yes.
What kind of suit are you going
wearing
to wear?
costumes for radio that's what we do.
Yeah.
There's a tradition, an English tradition of straw bears, which are these big creatures made of straw, and we kept seeing hazard tape strewn around the landscape, and we really wanted to make these sort of drapey, tattered jackety outfits, but obviously buying 200 metres of ribbon is not really on the budget at the moment. So we ended up using hazard tape of many kinds and colours. We made the costumes originally for a protest at Stonehenge.
And what were you protesting about?
We were
building of a road.
The underpass.
the
yeah.
road tunnel.
And so you turned up in the straw bear costumes with the hazard tape. Must have made
Hazard
quite
tape.
Yeah, the
Yes.
liaison officer definitely tried to give me some pushback and really tried to intimidate me, but I was standing there like this ridiculous beast, so there wasn't much that he could do really.
And putting them on now for your performance, will it change the performance that
Yes.
you're wearing the suits?
Yeah. The performance is called Utterances, and it's about trying to make free vocal sounds. It's about trying to respond to the place and how we're feeling and just let out any sound that comes. And that's much easier when you inhabit. It's like wearing a mask. You find another way of being when you're wearing a costume or a mask. So that's what we're going to try and do now.
Is it parakeets?
You can hear some
Hopefully
parakeets.
they'll get involved as well.
Yeah, well, they might join in, mightn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
That would be
I
great
do.
to have that
Hope so.
background. It's wonderful on this podcast when the natural world intervenes in the music. It's
Or
just
in,
amazing.
in this case, the feral world.
Yeah, exactly.
We're much more into feral nature than this idea of the unspoiled, which is why we call what we do broken folk. We're very anti this kind of rhetoric of purity that is associated with folk, which is a slippery slope into ethno-nationalism.
Right. So obviously we don't want that.
Perish the thought. Definitely don't want that.
So breaking it
Yeah.
does what?
Well, it's not so much breaking it as it's already broken, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Okay, let's get those costumes out. Wow, look at these costumes. Whoa. They make a great noise.
It's a lovely rustle, yeah.
I mean, it's slightly disconcerting not being able to see your face, I must say, because we spend so much time looking at each other's faces, don't we, to
Yes.
take clues from each other. So it is slightly off-putting, and you're starting to move now in a wonderful way.
They're very good for spinning.
Oh yes,
And children really like them.
because when you spin, they fly out, don't they? The tapes all fly out in different directions. That was definitely the strangest experience I've ever had in recording this podcast, but one of the most beautiful. It was really amazing. And you've pushed your costumes back a moment now, but just to picture the scene, if you would, of these two tattered costumes made of hazard tape with no faces, making that wonderful noise here under the trees. Claire, what is your vocal range? Because you go right high and then right low as well, don't you?
It's over 3 octaves,
right.
But also I'm an overtone singer, so some of the stuff is the subtones and some of the stuff is messing around with your mouth and tongue to bring out the higher harmonics of what you're singing, so it feels bigger than that, I think.
And how much of it is preordained and how much of it is improvised?
It's
all improvised. Yeah. There's things that maybe when we find a very similar note, I mean, we live together. We're partners in life. So also, I think that does a thing when you spend time dreaming and sleeping together as well. And so our sense of timing, even for us, I think sometimes is a bit uncanny and surprising that we came in on maybe the same note or exactly the same moment after the same amount of time. But there's no plan. It's just always in response to the space.
And you're responding to this beautiful woodland.
The woodland, that for me at first it was the sound of maybe distant football match or something and what that felt like, and then the parakeets who seemed to join in for a minute. The plane. Yeah, there's a lot, no?
Yeah, and responding, we do the performance a lot. We often start our concerts with that performance. So there's a sort of set of moves, and it's like a dance, it's always different, but it always has a kind of the similar patterns come up.
Well, it's interesting that you should mention the power of this woodland, because Peter O'Hare's been talking to us about the therapeutic power of the way in which this wood is used with patients.
I like coming into this section because it's a darker kind of tree. We've got the yews and we've got these huge pines. So it's a lovely one for our forest therapy. People coming in, and sometimes people, particularly if they're very depressed or something, they're not often looking up to the sky. And you can get them to look up to these huge big trees and to see the sky. Because they talk about nowadays blue therapy, which is all about the sky, focusing on the sky. Like green therapy is all about the grass and the ground. And it's important to try and link people into those if they've kind of got cut off from them. Because people wouldn't normally be coming into a wood maybe, or if they live in London, they may only be used to maybe parks and stuff. But to actually come out and to get them to be still, listen to the bird song, smell what's in the air, take in deep breaths, and that calmness and also kind of oneness with nature and the environment can be so powerful for so many people.
So we're coming out of the wood now and into a big open meadow, and I'm told that until very recently this was a wildflower meadow and that they've only just cut them down, so you can imagine this huge expanse covered in wildflowers must have been...
It is massive, isn't it?
Glorious. And I think again it's part of the diverse nature of these grounds. But I wanted to ask you more about ideas about madness and mental health in your work. Why do you find that subject one that you want to explore?
For me personally, it's been certainly something that I have experienced myself, that kind of brink of, particularly if you're in certain environments, in certain relationships with people, that you can feel yourself starting to crack, starting to lose that sense of security or stability within your own mind. And then people will potentially exacerbate that, be very, very angry, be abusive. So I think that nobody's immune to that, falling into that space, finding themselves in that mad space, in that unstable space. And then depending on the context that you're in, you could very easily be put into an institution. You could very easily be put there and find yourself there, and hopefully now care is different. But in those times, we know that there was a lot of neglect and a lot of negligence, and that's very, that then exacerbates the problem further, doesn't it? It doesn't tend to make a very healthy solution. I think there's a sort of fascination and a fear with madness, something that within our cultures has been something that we're told is horrifying. We've seen it in horror movies, in the sci-fi movies. I remember from a child that the Return to Oz and the moment that Dorothy is being given electric shock treatment because she's having visions. And many children, many young people are having visions now. They're seeing other dimensions. They're seeing things that aren't maybe there for the adults. But that was a punishment, and that was a horrifying thing that stayed with me, actually. And that fascination, I think, is the other side of it, isn't it? That curiosity about what that is and what it would be like to just step over that line. If there's something that happens in your life, which is that you suddenly become homeless, you lose a child, you lose a family member. There are so many possible situations that happen to us in life that can then tip us just over that tiny brink. So nobody is really spared, nobody's safe from it. We also know that there are mind diseases or issues that creep up within families, congenitally. You can suddenly find yourself, oh, okay, I'm here.
You can be prone to things. I think for me as well, so I'm non-binary. It's nice to have a name for it now. There wasn't a name for it in the early 80s. It's in the DSM-4, the Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. As psychiatric disorder, certainly something that I hid with mixed results during my childhood. I don't think I really surprised many of my friends when I came out. But it's an interesting thing for me about what's classified as unwell or disordered or unstable or whatever. And also I think fundamentally the thing about Bedlam is that there's lots to say about Bedlam, but particularly it's about what you do with people who can't or won't conform. Where do you put people who can't look after themselves or refuse not to say things or refuse to say things? If you're too quiet, if you're too loquacious, if you're too still, if you're too active, and you make people around you uncomfortable. There's a lot about neurodiversity in that, about so-called neurotypical people being made uncomfortable very easily. You make too much eye contact, not enough eye contact, people start getting weird, and it's you. You're the one who's weird, and everyone treats you like that. And you. So I think that the thing for us about asylum is this tension between a place of refuge and a place of abuse, and how that can be absolutely intertwined, And
the history of this hospital is absolutely that, isn't it? Because I'm sure now that it's absolutely intended to be a place of refuge, but in the past it was definitely a place of punishment.
Yeah.
And we should explore that a bit more, but I'd love you to sing your song, Tom of Bedlam, and tell me a little bit about that.
That's a song about Toms of Bedlam, or Bedlam beggars, and in King Lear, Mad Tom is a thing, were people begging by reason of craziness. People would apparently, this is in the 1600s, 15 and 1600s, wear a band of tin around their arm, which was allegedly a kind of proof that they had been let out as a harmless mad person. So they'd been to Bedlam, so they were definitely mad, but they'd been let out, officially let out, so they were not mad enough to cause harm. So Tom of Bedlam is one of the most amazing Elizabethan anonymous poems. I always suspect anonymous poems were written by women, but you never know.
Because it wasn't acceptable for them to be publicly a poet.
Quite possibly. Yeah. And then in the 1700s, a kind of sequel to Tom of Bedlam called Mad Maudlin was released. And a lot of people picked that up in the folk revival, that particular song. And it got played around. Lots of people have done versions of it. And they sometimes call it Tom of Bedlam. But they don't...
Can we just say about this name, Bedlam, because it came from Bethlehem, didn't it, originally?
Bethlem Hospital, corrupted in the way that Londoners wear words down by saying them faster and faster, like stones in a river, until they become something else. So yeah, Bethlem and then Bedlam. And it started off where Liverpool Street Station is now, in the 1200s, as a kind of religious institution, which was originally a hospital for all kinds of disorders, but then they absorbed one for lunatics, quote unquote. That was obviously a previous era of why does this happen? Blame the moon. We love the moon, don't we? We're big fans.
Yeah, and I've often been called hysteric, to be honest. Which generally doesn't help.
That's another era of explanations. Yeah. Blame the womb.
Yeah.
And now it's blame the brain. And actually we've moved into blame the DNA now.
But back to Tom of Bedlam.
Tom of Bedlam. So Mad Maudlin, people sing Mad Maudlin, but they don't sing Tom of Bedlam. And it's just as good. as Mad Maudlin, and we couldn't decide between the two, so we thought, you know what, let's sing them both at the same time. From the hag and hungry goblin that into rags would rend ye, and the spirit that stands by the naked man in the book of moons defend ye, that of your 5 sound senses you never be forsaken, nor wander from yourselves with Tom abroad to beg your bacon. And still I sing any food, any feeding, drink or clothing, come dame or maid, be not afraid, for Tom will injure nothing.
For to see Mad Tom of Bedlam, 10,000 miles I have travelled, Mad Maudlin goes on dirty toes, to save his shoes from gravel. I repent that ever poor Tom was so disdained, my wits are lost since him I've crossed, which makes me thus go chained. Still I do sing, bonny boys, bonny mad boys, Bedlam boys are bonny, for they all go bare and they live by the air, and they want no drink or money. For 30 bare years have I twice 20 been enraged, and a 40 been 3 times 15, endurance soundly caged in the lordly lofts of Bedlam, with stable soft and dainty, brave bracelets, strong sweet whips, ding dong, and wholesome hunger plenty. Still I do sing any food or any feeding, drink or clothing, come dame up maid, not afraid, for Tom will injure nothing. With a thought I took for Maudlin, in a cruise of pork or pottage, with a thing last thought, God bless you all. I befell into this dotage, I slept not since the conquest, till then I never waked, till a roguish boy of love when I lay me found and stripped me naked. Still I do sing any food or any feeding, drink or clothing, come dame or maid, be not afraid, poor Tom will injure nothing. When I should have shown my sow's face, and swag my honey barrel, and an oaken and I pound my skin to a seat of guilty sparrow. The moon's white cast have murdered the lolly owl my marrow, the flaming drake and the night crow make me music to my sorrow. Still I do sing any food, any feeding, drink or clothing, come dame or maybe not afraid, poor Tom will injure nothing. The palsy plays my pulses when I break your pigs or pulling, your covers take all matchless me, your John take clear or sullen, when I want Provence with Humphrey, I stop and when benighted, I repose in pause of waking souls, yet never am affrighted, yet never am affrighted, yet never am affrighted, yet never am affrighted. Still I do sing any food, any feeding, drink or clothing, come dame or maybe not afraid, for Tom will injure nothing. Still I do sing bonny boys, oh bonny mad boys, Bedlam boys are bonny, for they all go bare and they live by the air, for want no drink or money.
I have so many things to say about that performance because it's so visual. You're acting the performance. You know, you're really in the characters there that you're singing about, aren't you?
Yeah, we like to choose the folk songs that are from a first-person perspective. We like to embody the characters. I really like finding different voices for different stories. I really like to feel what it would feel to be there, to inhabit it. Obviously, Carli's background is musical theatre, so...
Obviously.
Well, I could tell.
I'm a clown.
Yeah.
I kind of emerged as a clown through the world of dance, ended up in some very strange situations in relationships and on stage with actually men, unfortunately, who kind of drove me into that mad space of being a clown. And so to sing that song, I think you have to go there. You have to really feel it.
We have to go there.
Oh, well,
I mean, I'm sure you
there.
could
Maybe
sing
you
it in a
have
very
to.
pretty way if you wanted to.
No, but it makes it so much more powerful when you're inhabiting the characters like that. And then you've mashed up. You're singing different lyrics, at the
two
same
songs
time.
at the same time.
Which is still quite complicated, to be honest. It's
quite
a piece
hard on the
that's
memory.
still hard on the
Yes.
memory, and we're still trying to find it. So
Yeah, there are a couple of little
there's a
glitches
few
in that one,
glitches
but
there, but
I think it will go with it.
I
Yeah.
think we could
Yeah.
say that was okay.
And who are you imagining when you're singing the song? What character? Tell me about the character that you're imagining, the Tom
Yeah.
of Bedlam.
I
Here's
feel like
Mad
I
Maudlin.
feel like she's cracked. She's gone into that other space, and so she's somehow harnessing the power of the elements to keep her going. I feel like when there is a madness upon you or within you, that somehow to really go there and to lean into that space is kind of an escape. It's kind of a sanctuary of its own, because the real world tends to repel you more and more and more. And so there's something also, I think, about that madness of losing someone, that falling for someone deeply, that it sends you entirely insane.
That's what Mad Maudlin's about, isn't it? It's about finding her Tom of Bedlam. So that's about somebody being in love with somebody who is Tom of Bedlam. So it's in a way they're the kind of they're two partners,
like the yin
in a way.
and yang of the story.
Yeah, and a little bit reminding us a little bit that binary. I mean, obviously, being non-binary, I'm fascinated by binaries. And the thing about the statues, that survive from the worst excesses era of Bedlam, when it became infamous, globally infamous, are these two statues which are still in the Museum of the Mind right now, of mania and melancholy. And I think the
raving mania,
yeah,
isn't
Yeah.
it?
raving
It's really,
and melancholy madness.
Yeah.
And
So
that
they make a
melancholy-
distinction, don't they, between the raving kind of madness and the melancholy madness, and they're two twisted figures. One of them less twisted, obviously, because they're not raving, but I mean, extraordinary figures that were on the gateposts of the institution.
very muscular, naked guys they are.
But actually, melancholy felt so sort of peaceful in a way.
Yeah,
there
has
was
a very
so
small,
much.
childlike face,
Yeah.
quite smiley, which is not how I imagine melancholy. And of course, melancholy was also known as Maudlin. There is this kind of corruption of Magdalene into Maudlin, and Maudlin then becomes a kind of... If anyone wants to do a seminar on Tom of Bedlam, I've got way too much to say about it, but it's an Elizabethan poem, so it has a lot of layers and quibbles and puns and like puzzles built within it. But with a thought I took for Maudlin is possibly thinking a thought for melancholy, but possibly thinking a thought about the partner, because it's it's a kind of corruption of Mary, or it's a complicated thing. A whole cruise of cockle pottage, which is one of the most interesting metaphors for a brain that I've ever heard.
A whole cruise of cockle pottage.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And that's about a mixed up brain.
Yeah, that's the kind of grey muck in your head.
My goodness me, that's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just one of the many incredible lines in it. I think maybe my favourite from Mad Maudlin is cutting mince pies from children's thighs.
To feed the fairies.
To feed the fairies, yeah. That's...
Really powerful images. Let's hear a little bit more about the history of this place from Peter.
The first site of Bethlem Hospital was in the very centre of London at Bishopsgate, which is now where Liverpool Street Station is. And the first hospital was set up there in 1247 by a group of monks. And there are buildings on this site which reference really that old history, like Bishopsgate. That's our training centre here on the modern Bethlem Hospital, is named after the original site. And then we have wards like Fitzmary, named after Simon Fitzmary, the Alderman of London, who provided initial land and endowments. But in the early days, it wasn't specifically seen for mental health. It was for paupers, poor people, people who had nowhere else to go. But they did become famous for begging, unfortunately, which is why they had the basket, which is also where the word basket case seems to come from. And the basket is still on the emblem of Bethlem Hospital, because they used to go around London, begging. And that's particularly poignant for us as occupational therapists, because we often worked with weaving and stuff like that to make baskets. So there's that ancient tradition which is still there. But over time it became known for dealing with people who did have what we now call mental health problems. In those days they would probably have been called mad or, out of control in various ways, maybe possessed. They had different ways of talking about it in those times.
So now we've come to an incredibly surreal place. We're going up some stone steps, and you can see here the remains of Monk's Orchard House, which was the stately home that was here and that's been kind of knocked down or demolished to make way for, on the right here, the National Autism Unit, which is behind a great big fence.
I should probably say at this moment that my mum is an autism specialist. That's her.
Right.
That's her thing.
So she might work with people like
She may
this
well
who are
have been
here.
in that very building, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So when they got the site back in the 30s, it was falling down already, I think. So they pulled it down to build
They've
the
left
new
the
hospital.
relics of it, which is rather nice. You can see the sort of footprint of it, can't you?
And these like broken teeth, weird pedestals or columns.
Yeah, wow. Oh, this has got a bit of vibe, hasn't it? So,
I'm just wondering if it might be a place for you to sing your song through Moorfields.
yeah, I think so.
Maybe you've got to sit for the accordion,
Yeah, and the
we'll
drum.
both sit down, actually.
Yeah, we'll
I'll
sit
sit
for
on the
this one.
floor.
and you could sit on one of these pillars. Maybe
Yeah,
they're
that's-
only at waist height, aren't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, we can sit on this remains of the garden wall.
Tell us about the song.
Through Morefields is a fascinating song. It's a song about a girl who has wealthy parents, falls in love with their apprentice. They banish the apprentice, get him pressed to sea, forcibly removed and sent away on a ship. She becomes very distressed and they send her to Bedlam. And of course at the time, Bedlam in Moorfields is one of its most notorious locations, where it was a big palace on the outside and a zoo on the inside, with appalling conditions and inmates treated like animals.
People chained up and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and people coming and paying to see them.
Paying to see them.
Yeah, that it was treated as an edifying spectacle, like a hanging. So you would take people to look at what can happen to you if you continue down this path of misbehaviour.
And it turns up in literature, doesn't it? In Shakespeare and Hogarth and those kind of
Yes,
things.
yeah. The final engraving of the Rake's Progress is when he's fallen as low as he can fall, which is Bedlam, and he's there. The fascinating thing about the song is that it was not only in the broadsheet ballad archive. Broadsheet ballads are the kind of pop songs of the day, and also a kind of prototype newspaper. There were these large sheets which had a collection of songs, some of them kind of notionally true stories, some of them accounts of things, some of them propaganda, lots of anti-Semitism and misogyny in those, if you want to look those up. But the thing about Through Moorfields is that it was also, there's lots of versions of it. The earliest manuscript we found is The Distracted Maiden. Distracted is, of course, a word meaning mad. The interesting thing about it is that the version that was collected during the folk revival at the turn of the century includes the line "a broad piece of gold," which is a weird line and not at all found in many other songs.
What does a broad piece of gold mean?
The broad piece of gold is what the apprentice uses, presumably his voyage went well. It's what the apprentice uses to buy off the porter to get into the asylum to get her free again.
To get the beloved out.
Yeah.
The one thing about this song for me that's very interesting is that actually there is a kind of happy ending, which is that he comes back, he discovers her, they get her out, they get married. But then there's a feeling of that then, well, for me that's a little bit tricky, because it's like, well, yeah, but what happened to her in there? We don't really know what next. We don't really talk about CPTSD at this time, so what
But
what
if
was
you've been
the
in
life?
Moorfields, the after effects must have been
Indeed.
horrendous.
And what was the life onward? So it kind of it opens up a nice question for me of like, well, what happens beyond that? So we get to imagine into the song, and maybe for the sequel of the song, potentially.
So just to tell you what's going on here, Carli's sitting on the ground with her drum, and Clair is sitting on a small piece of stone with their accordion, and the sun is beating down, and in the background we have the autism centre with the fence there, which is an intrusive presence really in this beautiful green space. And then to the left of me I can see the remains of the balustrade from Monk's Orchard House, like kind of discarded stone chess pieces, all fallen on their sides and decaying. And there's ivy growing up behind you there, Claire.
Yeah, we really like this idea of unfolding time. You know, we really like the anachronism and the sense of time as a series of layers rather than a linear thing, and how the past is all still there, you know.
As through Moorfields to Bedlam I went, I heard a young damsel to sigh and lament. She was wringing her hands and tearing her hair, crying, "Oh, cruel parents, you have proved severe." Crying, "Oh, cruel, oh, cruel." Crying, "Oh, cruel parents, you have proved severe." Because my love was your apprentice, you know. You pressed him to see which proved my overthrow. Your cruel base actions caused me to complain, for the loss of my love has distracted my brain. To banish my true lover away to sea, it caused me in Bedlam to sigh and to say, sure never wealthy parents were so cross and unkind as to cause their own daughter to be closely confined. When the apprentice first came on shore, as he was walking past Bedlam door, he heard a young damsel lamenting full sore, crying, "Oh, I," crying, "Oh, I shall never see him more." When the apprentice, with surprise, he saw through the window her beautiful eyes, he went to the porter the truth for to tell, saying, "Shew me the room where my true love doth dwell." The porter upon the apprentice did stare, to see how he was for the loss of his dear. Well, he gave to the porter a broad piece of gold, saying, "Shew me the way to the joy of my soul." When that his amorous jewel he did see, he took her and he sat her down straight on his knee, and she on the porter began for to stare, saying, "Ain't you, ain't you, ain't you, ain't saying, ain't you?" ain't you, my joy and my dear. Yes, I am the young man your parents pressed to see, my own dearest jewel for the loving of thee. Then she said, well, all my sorrows are fled, so adieu to, adieu to, adieu to all my sorrows, all my sorrows, all my sorrows. So adieu to these chains and this straw bed. They sent for her parents, who came with speed. They went to the church and they were married indeed. So come all you wealthy parents, a due warning take, and never drive, never drive, never drive, and never drive true lovers their promises to break.
Thank you. I just wonder how it feels to sing that sitting here.
Sweaty. In an emotional way. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, about this sense of being rescued is really important, and the idea of asylum as a place of simultaneous rescue and imprisonment. It's very complicated. The different kinds of power and history at play, and also the kind of family relevance for me, that both my grandfather and my mother worked here when they were training.
And did they talk to you about their work?
Not much. A little bit. My mother actually always calls this place the Maudslin rather than Bethlem or Bedlam.
Oh, and that is its official name?
Yeah.
Because it is the Maudslin Hospital Trust, isn't it?
So for a long time I didn't know the relationship between the two. My grandfather was actually the head of the women's section at Broadmoor High Security Mental Asylum, and that's where my mum grew up.
And that must have been incredibly stressful work.
Yeah, he was an unusual man by all accounts. He started as a GP in Australia, and his wife, my grandmother, who I lived with for many years in London when I was doing my PhD, was a dentist, one of the first very small, very blonde female Australian dentists.
She was a fierce and wonderful woman, she really was.
Yeah, she was fantastic. She was really ferociously intelligent. But yeah, my grandfather was certainly an unusual man and definitely had communication issues of his own.
And your mum growing up in Broadmoor, effectively.
Yeah.
And then going into the profession herself.
Absolutely.
And did your grandfather and your mother give you any insight into some of the issues we've been talking about, about the way in which we relate to people with mental illness and psychiatric problems?
Yeah, unfortunately my grandfather was diabetic and he had a series of strokes, and so I didn't really know him. But I think the thing they passed on to me was this deep sense of compassion. For example, my grandmother went into a shop where they were discussing a quote-unquote escaped mental patient. This must be back in the 70s, basically talking about them as though they were a monster, and my grandmother saying that she hoped they were safe, and I think that's the thing, that my parents, no matter who you are or what you've suffered or what you've done, I think they have a very strong understanding that circumstances are not under our control all the time, and that anybody can find themselves doing things that they would have never imagined that they would do under different circumstances. So I think...
And otherwise, it all depends on in whose eyes, who's gauging, who's doing the examination, who's verifying that this person is in fact mad, according to which categories and which classifications.
Yes.
And often they're not the people who ought to be evaluating that, perhaps.
Sometimes,
their judgment of people is...
Yeah, I think certainly growing up around psychiatrists, you realise how weird most psychiatrists are. So I think there's a very, and that relates to Morefields as well, in the sense of, who were the maddest, the inmates or the people who built the hospital, as this kind of ridiculous
palace on the outside and this atrocious, ruinous thing on the inside. All of this money wasted on a fancy facade and none on the actual humane treatment and care.
A very powerful metaphor.
Yes, and actually relates to the scandal of fit-to-work assessments and how many people they killed.
Well, I understand that there are some really well-developed orchards, apple orchards in particular, that we can go to, which are a kind of different terrain to the one that we're sitting in now. So shall we walk on?
Yes, let's keep exploring.
This is our small orchard over here. I'm really proud of this because we sort of restored it all ourselves. If you'd come here about 15 years ago, this was all just covered with briars. You wouldn't even know there was an orchard, except for a few sticking out of the top. But we got help from a group called the Orchard Project, and they came in and they helped us clear away all the briars and discover what trees were actually left. So these ones, I'm very proud to say, are the ones we planted ourselves, these smaller ones. And we've already harvested quite a few of them. So we've had the patients out picking apples in the last couple of weeks. They have different levels of groups, sort of beginning skills groups where they'll be learning skills or doing gardening as a therapy primarily for themselves. But if they're here longer term, like some of the clients from our forensic service are, they then can move on to what we call the vocational level, where they're actually more learning work skills, and then they can get paid because they're doing actual work while they're here. So harvesting the orchard and contributing and making the juice is a paid job that they can have, and that really motivates an awful lot of them. That's really important actually for an awful lot of the young men, particularly from the forensic services, and they learn the skills, you know, and they feel so much better about themselves and about their lives, and I think it does prepare them better for life outside afterwards. So we're just going to walk over to the big orchard. So you can see a big avenue of apples. These are mostly Bramleys, so like cooking apples. It is amazing how they planted them back in the 1940s, we think, but it gives a lovely cathedral type of effect, I think. And you know, for the first 7 or 8 years, there was no apples. And I was thinking, oh God, what have we done? And we were nearly going to pull them out. Thank God we waited long enough, because look at them now, they're covered in apples. So there's a lesson there, I think. Sometimes you just have to persevere with things, you know, and they'll come out right in the end.
So this is remarkable, this orchard, isn't it? Because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 serried ranks or avenues of apple trees, quite mature apple trees, and underfoot.
They're majestic, and everything's rotting. It's all in various stages of decomposition, and the smell of this
It's amazing.
is like the beginnings of the cider.
Yeah, you can smell apples
really
so powerfully, and you can walk for, you know, maybe 200 yards through the middle here of the trees, and it's incredibly atmospheric. But again, on our left, we've got the fence around the secure unit. So
yeah, that's a big fence, that one.
yeah, it's a very significant piece of security. But the apple trees are beautiful, and I know that there's been a lot of work done on looking after these apple trees. Would this be a place to sing one of your songs?
Yeah.
What would you sing?
Well, sing My Witch, which is it's a very old, from 1500s, love poem which a man wrote to a lady thinking that it was romantic.
To accuse her of witchcraft?
In that classic way. And we always dedicate it to anybody who might have ever been called a witch. Because
Still
it feels...
happens. A good friend of ours was, her GP said, looking at the runes tattooed on her fingers, said that the reason that she was depressed is because she was a witch.
No.
And if she gave up witchcraft and turned to Christ, then obviously her problems would go away.
So it's still a term of abuse that is used to
still
put
very
down
much
women
going
in particular.
Yes.
That's why I think many women are taking it back as well. Many people are taking it back, in fact.
Yes.
And you have a patch on your handbag
I have
there.
a patch, yes, that directly says witch. I've definitely been called a witch many, many times, but only when things turn sour, you know, which is interesting being here among the apples.
Sour
actually.
apples.
The sour, rotting apples. It's
a poem. It's a poem, and it's hard to tell in what spirit it was intended. But that thing that happens when predominantly men, not always, but predominantly men accuse
someone else of being at fault for their own desire, which is certainly still a very, very live issue. Eyes bewitch my wit, your wit bewitch my will. Thus with your eyes and wit, you do bewitch me still, and yet you are no witch, whose spirit is not evil, and yet you are a witch, and yet you are no devil. Oh, witching eyes and wit, where wit and eyes may read, a witch and not a witch, and yet a witch
We're in the Courtyard garden of the main occupational therapy department at Bethlem Hospital. This garden was built to celebrate the 750th anniversary of Bethlem, and it's a beautiful space where patients come to sit and relax, hear the beautiful water coming from the fountain along with the bird song. And the fountain itself was made by patients here in our ceramic studio. The water that tumbles down through these lovely ceramic sections and then it falls into the little pond. All the tiles around the pond were made by children in the hospital. So there's a real sense that the patients contributed to the making of the garden. It's been planted from a sensory point of view, so they can touch, feel, smell the beautiful plants and help them to relax. We do all types of activities, everything from art, ceramics, woodwork, gardening, textiles. Nowadays we do a lot of IT, digital stuff as well, but we also do music, dance, drama. We had a Bollywood dancing class today, which has really been taken off. Traditionally, the view of an asylum and a psychiatric hospital was about locking people up, and kind of a bit like prisons. And we know it's not good for people's mental health usually to be locked up. Most of us love to be doing stuff, and want to be stuff and want to be active in the world that gives meaning to our lives. For example, in our art studio, the number of people that have come through, some may have never done art before, some may be good artists already, but the stuff that has been produced. So that's why we have our own gallery, to showcase the kind of work that emerges from when people are here. Absolutely amazing. And some have gone on to just live their lives as artists, and they didn't know that before they came in. So that's just one example. I would say the same with things like the garden and the horticulture. The number of people that really get into gardening and it becomes an important part of their life, that's very common. But other things they may not have had a chance, like pottery is an amazing thing, because you're dealing with clay and you have your hands in there from the word go. You know, it's got a whole sensory thing too. And yes, you can come up with the most amazing stuff. You know, so there's all kinds of reasons for people to be involved in practical activities. Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
We're really taking over the occupational health courtyard garden now because Carli is getting out the full drum kit. So it's not just the military drum you've got there.
No, there's a snare from Mexico actually. That's when I lived in Mexico, so I was deciding to build myself a new drum kit. But the sound of it is what makes many drummers, any drummer that sees what we do comes up and goes, what was that? What was that other drum? And they come and examine it. It's got some kind of magic in there.
Extremely cheap slack snare drum.
Yeah. With the snare taken off.
So. Claire, what are you putting together there?
I'm putting together a puzzle of steel work. Carli is the drummer and I'm the drum technician, and I invent ways to attach all of the weird percussion together so that it can be played.
That's going to be a production number. There's a wood block here.
Oh, nice knuckle. You got some knuckle power. You might have a bruise in the morning, but yeah, well done.
That's tiny cymbal being
this is a tiny little
into
kind
place.
Of, almost like a gongish kind of cymbal actually. This is a scissor.
And you're going to have the tinkling of the fountain in the background.
Hopefully.
Here in the lovely
I have
garden.
to try and play very quietly so that we...
Oh, what are those?
These are called ayoyotes. They were given to me by an ex-partner who was Mexican and did the Aztec dancing. So you wear them on the ankles. A lot of the point of the Aztec dance is that you're stamping into the ground to pull up the energies. So these are used in that
and what's inside
very
the shells?
percussive way. There's tiny little... There's seeds.
Shells, they're seed pods.
Seeds.
Okay.
And inside is a tiny piece of, like a ball bearing.
Oh, right.
Tiny ball bearings.
Can I have a
inside.
shake?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Makes a very rewarding sound.
It's a very big sound, isn't it? Yeah, isn't it a lovely thing?
And there's going to be a synth
Yeah.
synthesizer.
Very small one.
Yeah, but nonetheless a synthesizer. How are you going to power that?
Cynthia, that's her name.
Oh, yeah.
Cynthia the synth.
She's the third band member, essentially.
She's our bassist.
We can't really travel with other band members, obviously, because it's very small in the van. She eats nothing. She rarely talks.
A little bit of juice.
But she always performs very, very well. So.
And there is actually a brain in your drum case there. What is that brain? It's a brain actually in a rainbow headband.
Yes, this is the queer brain.
The queer brain.
This is how the queer brain looks.
It's actually your dad's brain originally.
This actually was my dad's, yeah.
Really?
Who is less queer, but...
How's he coping without it?
He's doing okay.
Surprisingly
It's
well.
quite squidgy, and he seems to be still okay, yeah, it's fine.
Do you use that on stage?
This is kind of one of the mascots, I guess, that we put out, because, I mean, everybody has an image, maybe, when they think of the very colourful,
corporate
extreme,
pride.
Yeah, corporate pride image of queerness. But as you can see, we're not necessarily going for that. We're not always in full drag. You know, there's different ways to present yourself.
It was amazing to walk past that building just now, wasn't it? Because we're in the occupational therapy area, but there's a gorgeous building around the corner there, which I think is being made by people who've been working in occupational therapy.
And it has all of this unique and very well executed ceramic work, all of these beautiful tiles and huge ceramic snails and all kinds of things.
In
all
bright
over the
colours.
front. Yeah, it's just lovely. It's really beautiful.
So everything's assembled. What are you going to perform here?
We're going to perform a song called Unquiet Grave. The Unquiet Grave is a very old theme, medieval maybe, and then the tune is a tune which has got various different names. In Canada it's known as Lost Jimmy Phelan, or Phelan, which is about a logging accident. In Scotland, where it probably comes from, the borders, it's a slow pipe tune and it's called The Blantyre Explosion and is about a mining disaster. And it seemed appropriate for us to describe the victims of austerity as an industrial disaster, because it was on an industrial scale and certainly profiteering. But it's about the death of Elaine Christian, who took her own life because she was too stressed to go to her fit to work assessment and was worried about losing everything. And actually then thereafter I found out that her husband then took his life as well. So this is
sad.
Yeah.
Lonely I walk by the banks of a river, watching the waters as evening drew nigh. All night I wondered, then I spied another. She was weeping and wailing She was weeping for one who is now lying lonely, weeping for one whom no mortal can save. The dark swirling waters around her encircle, calling to us from the unquiet grave. Cold blows the winter night down by the river, cold as the grave are the first drops of rain, cold as the clocks that assess work and pensions, cold as the lips are of poor dead Elaine. Come bring us a light out of the darkness, bring us some water out of a stone, bring back a blossom that's withered and fallen, seek justice from those that call Westminster home. We've all heard that 2,400 people were dead 2 weeks after being found fit to work. But they've covered up how many hundreds of thousands have been helped to their graves by a government clerk. Come bring us a light out of the darkness, bring us some water out of a stone, bring back a blossom that's withered and fallen, seek justice from those that call Westminster home. Disabled and scared of a next work assessment, May's hostile environment got to Elaine. The pills and 10 cuts on her wrists didn't kill her. Elaine Christian drowned in the Holderness drain. Come bring us a light out of the darkness, bring us some water out of a stone, bring back a blossom that's withered and fallen, seek justice from those that call Westminster home, seek justice from those that call Westminster home, seek justice from those that call Westminster home.
What an amazing experience that was to hear that song in this courtyard here with the fountain running behind, and there's a lot of contemporary resonance in that song, isn't there, that you've deliberately put there.
Especially with this song, we've had people coming through sending us messages, speaking to us directly, that have been incredibly moved because their parent or their sibling has suicided, has died as a result directly of these work assessments. And so that really does feel like the work that we're making has a reason and has a meaning and touches people and helps to heal something for people. So that feels precious.
I must say that I'm just taking a moment to reflect on the experience that we've had together today, because it's been really thought-provoking for me to hear your music, but also your thoughts on the subject of madness, mental illness and this institution and its history. How's it felt for you?
I think it's really lovely to end here in the OT space, because it's definitely the place that for me is always the most joyful and uplifting, and I think it's, for me, it's the most direct, it's the simplest, it's the warmest, it's the most communal way of recovery.
And I think that's a thing that helps to take people out of the extreme isolation and what happens when you are dehumanized by systems. We all deserve a chance. Whatever's happened or whatever we've gone through, we all deserve a chance to find a new way onwards, and this seems to provide it, doesn't it?
Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for sharing your music with us, and it's just been an amazing experience. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Yeah, thanks for having us.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Folk on Foot as much as we enjoyed making it. There are over 60 episodes of Folk on Foot for you to explore, featuring amazing artists like Eliza Carthy, Johnny Flynn, The Unthanks, Corrine Polwood, Chris Drever, Sandra Kerr, Catherine Tickell, and many, many more. So please do explore our back catalogue. And if you like what we do, we really need your support to keep going. You can become a member and get great rewards, or you can simply buy us a coffee. To do either, and to sign up for our ad-free version, just go to folkonfoot.com/support-us. Every penny we get goes back into making more episodes, so please do support us if you can.